Shake your lethargy. Come alive to innocence once more. Believe past your own jaded cynicism. Pretend you are young once more. Jump up with a spring in your feet. Fall breathlessly in love again. Let the colors of the world wash over your walls, brushing the grays away. Let the sunlight of hope flood through your doubting self. Oh, let the music play. Dance till you ache and drop. Laugh till you cry. Sing till your lungs burst, and journey till the very road ends, and dream by the moonless, starless nights. Sleep with a secret smile on your lips, your body flush with the imprints of lips. Come alive, my dearest. Reclaim yourself from the living dead. Life beckons. Srividaya Srinivasan. Welcome to the Lost Traveler Podcast. I am your ever-loving host, Henry Cameron Allen, and I am here today with a very special luminary, I would say, Tina Davidson, who is a brilliant classical composer, 45 years now in her career. Her work has been performed all over the world, and she's renowned in her field, and has also kind of a very interesting memoir about her life and time. And I'm just so excited to meet you. Welcome.
Oh, I am so happy to be here with you today. Yes.
Where are you based now?
I am in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. So I lived in Philadelphia for 25 years, and that city was extremely good to me and to my music. And then I remarried and moved out here. I am separated and divorced from my husband, and I decided, you know, I was trying to figure out if I was going to go back to Philadelphia because it is such a great musical city, or go to New York. And honestly, Lancaster is just a train ride away, an hour from Philadelphia, a little bit more, and maybe 2.5 hours from New York. So why leave this beautiful countryside, so I'm just very happy to have this home, and my little garden and my little dogs, and it's working out really well for me.
That's beautiful. Half of my family is from Philly. My mother's
Oh,
side of the family, she was born there. And so I have
okay.
many happy memories of childhood going to visit family there. And I still have some family there. So it's nice to
Yeah,
have
yeah.
that connection as well. It's a great city.
Yes, yes. It is a great city. And I think again, I think a lot of those kinds of cities are greater for younger people. Um, what I noticed is, I did love being there. I loved bringing up my daughter. I love the diversity. I love the free range of cultural activities and city activities. And but the noise and the trash, and I think the noise was the hardest for me. I am not someone, interestingly enough, as a lifetime musician and composer, I don't like to really listen to music very much.
I've
And
heard that a lot.
when yeah, and so living in close quarters in a city life, you get a lot of noise. Now, I happen to love ambient noise. I love the noise of nature. I actually love sort of traffic noise. I'm always interested in sound, but I think that music kind of interferes with the interior music that's playing in my ears. So it's nice to have to be free of that.
It's really interesting, where I am in a remote, tiny, ancient village in the southwest of Spain. It's a rural environment, and yet, the closest city is about 40 miles away. And so if I want an urban landscape, it's easy enough to get to. If I want the ocean,
Mhm.
it's a day trip. That's beautiful sound. I before I moved
Mhm.
to Europe, about 6.5 years ago, I was in Gloucester, Massachusetts. So I was
Okay.
surrounded by the sea, and I miss that.
Mm,
I do love
mm.
that kind of a cacophony, but I
Oh, it's
understand that when you're immersed in your career as an artist, that it's important to have another side of yourself that takes a break from.
and I think that as for me, as getting older, I have less flexibility around some of those things. Um, I, and also, I live a kind of, I think artists always enjoy their solitude and, search it out, because actually when I'm writing music, I don't, I always feel like I'm surrounded by sound, and, I have this sort of second life that I'm living. I
Mm.
have my washing the dishes and walking the dogs life, or taking care of children life, doing laundry life. But then I have this separate life, which is the composing life. And so I need to have time. I have a lot of adjustment internally and have less patience for the external
When did you
adjustments.
when did you notice that shift? One of the projects I'm working on right now as a universal life skills educator, mentor, and I don't know, student, I would say. I'm working on a project right now I'm calling Agecation. I think that it's a universal life skill. It's not just about aging, but aging well. And it's something that could certainly be taught from an early age at every stage of life, but isn't and hasn't been for a long time. There was an era, which I'm 57 now, and I remember the days when grandparents were more present and
Mm,
sometimes even
mhm,
living with the family. So you saw
mhm, mhm,
the aging
mhm.
process and unfold in front of you, and to be a witness to that was a great classroom for it. And so yeah, so I'm sort of sitting in that threshold and that liminal space between my autumn and winter, I guess, and
Your second and third act.
my second and third, or the segunda primavera, as they say.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right. When did
Well,
you
and I
when did
love the idea. Right. I love the idea of, so I just turned, I'm 70,
Mhm.
and I I know that I was listening to an interview with Jane Fonda, and she called this her third act. And one of the things that she said, usually in the third act, that's when it's really about making sense of the second and the first and the second act, or bringing them together, or concluding the story, or pulling all the parts together. And I thought that was such a wonderful metaphor. um Now, I published my memoir. I started writing it just when I was 60. And
Okay.
I think that's not surprising in a kind of funny way. I think I was I was, my field is has a lot of ageism in it.
Yep.
The arts love the young artist. They want to find the new thing. What's the new artwork, or the new music, or the new theater production? And music field in particular is very ageist. So I was feeling some of that. And I thought, well, I would like to start writing not only about my life, which is kind of tangentially interesting, but about my composing process and how I compose. So this memoir is little short stories of my life at sort of varying stages. But the next chapter is always a chapter from my journals, which I was writing in my 30s and my 40s, that actually, some of them are looking back at my childhood and trying to understand them. And some of them are actually writing music about not only what's going on for me right at that moment, but how I was thinking of my history.
Yeah.
And I am a composer who really writes out of self-understanding. I'm kind of my own landscape. And I want to say that, composers and artists do it very differently. They have their own unique way of doing it, but this is the way I do it. And I'm interested in my emotional growth and my spiritual growth and my connection to my interior and my exterior world. And that's always been my sense of exploration.
Hi, this is Henry Cameron Allen. For all of us, especially in these times, life is a journey fraught with challenges. But I'm convinced that the keys to unlocking your full potential are already within you. That's why I started Guy Wire Counseling and Mentoring. A guy wire is a stable cable that lends stability to a freestanding structure during unstable times. As your mentor and counselor, your guy wire, I will guide and support you as we discover the power of your inner awareness. I'll help you identify your purpose even through your grief. I'm an internationally certified grief and survival counselor, focusing mainly but not exclusively on men's mental health, and I'm a lifetime member of the Complementary Therapists Accredited Association and the International Holistic Therapists and Course Providers. I know that the world is a fractured place. I believe that together we can simplify your grief journey and achieve self-actualization by recognizing the common threads that bind us all, universal life skills. With the support, the stable support of a guy wire during your unstable times, you can develop the skills you need to stand strongly, solidly on your own with confidence and grace. Guy Wire is a free service to members of the Lost Travelers Club and a low-cost alternative for everyone else. Let's spend an hour together and see where it takes us. You have nothing to lose. Visit guy-wire.org now to start your journey toward your purpose. Thanks.
So getting back to ageism, that I started writing this book in my 60s, I think makes sense. Mm-hmm. It was a time when I wanted to reflect about where I had been and where I am now. And also for the music field, start to talk about the composing process and bring kind of words to it. It's kind of wording, how do I do this? So it's not this kind of weird, mystical, magical thing that composers do somehow, because they're geniuses. And I just think that distances the audience. Instead of bringing them closer, it kind of says, oh, well, classical music is, it's not really about me.
Right.
It's about them, or right. It's about, I don't know, something else. And I want it to be like literature or nonfiction or fiction, that it's relatable, that composers or artists are really writing about who they are in this time. It's kind of a documentation from their point of view of what's going on. And certainly, I think you can say that about great classical composers, that you get a sense of the lifestyle of Beethoven's time. And that he was probably kind of a little bit of a grumpy old man, he had some hard knocks and he wasn't always too happy about it. So
look
Beethoven
look
is
at Bach.
kind of,
Bach outlived 13 of his 20 children. And I listen to Bach in a very different way now, having known that, being what we call a peregrine myself. It's a new word for parents who have outlived their kids. I was researching and finding who in history, what notable people that we will recognize were peregrines, and how did that inform their lives and their work, and find out that Bach was a 13-time peregrine. I mean, think of the beautiful.
Well, and not only that, he almost always signed his works to the greater glory of God.
That's right.
And I've thought a lot about that. So his audience was God.
Yeah.
It was just this personal thing that he was doing. He wasn't, I don't think, there's a wonderful new biography of Mozart, and the author says, he didn't think that Mozart was writing music that he thought was going to last. That wasn't, it was entertainment. It was kind of like a TV show. They, you could hear it and then it was gone. They didn't have recordings of it.
Right.
So I do love that idea that Bach was really writing. I don't know if for God is the right way, but in relationship to God. Sort of, this is what I have for you, God, and it was just this personal thing. It wasn't, and a lot of his music he wrote as sort of studies for pianists to get better, like all the preludes and fugues and the inventions. A lot of that was just, kind of functional. But anyway, getting back to aging.
Getting back
I'll get you back to it.
Education and
yes,
let your heart
education.
Yeah.
I do think I am fascinated by my artistic aging and what it means. And I am starting to write another book now. And it was going to be called Being 60, but I'm 70 now, so being 70. But what happens? I mean, I think we know that our energy changes, but what happens to the creative process? I think we might have an ideal that, like, Mozart was dictating his requiem, his last notes. Of course, he was 35. He wasn't, he was sort of in the middle of things. But, what is, how do I manage my creativity? How has it changed? I think as a younger person in my 30s and 40s and even 50s, it was almost obsessive. Like I had a problem, like I had an addiction, that I was always thinking about it. My connection was sort of very narrow and kind of laser focused. And that might have had to do also with some about visibility, wanting to be seen as an artist, wanting to be recognized, wanting to be heard, etc. And I feel now that my creativity, it's not laser focused anymore. It's kind of oozing, oozes around. So, I've written a memoir that's been well received. I'm thinking of writing something else. I have, created programs that advance teaching young people composing without knowing anything about music. So I've done a lot of creative things. I am actually do a lot of pastels right now. I do a lot of journaling. That's really part of my process. And so I'm just wondering if maybe this time period is kind of about oozing more than being driven. So it's coming out sort of on all sides of me rather than just being channeled into one, into one thing. And that really interests me.
Well, you have a body of work and you have a body of life that you can just sort of lean back into and reflect. I'm finding that now at 57 that I'm actually I've had a creative career as a theater artist, and it's changed. Something has shifted, and to be able to feel almost less in control, a sense of surrender to where I am and how my body, mind, and spirit are evolving still at 57. And my company, my theater company, explores through the art of audio theater, the dance across the threshold between the human physical and the human spiritual. That's where I'm living right now is in that liminal space. You can find the work that we've already started in rescuing the stories that are dying with the people that carry them, folk and fairy tales from around the world, and producing them in an artisanal way, using the craft that I've developed over my lifetime, using the and the navigating of grief to inform how I curate my work. And grieving is also a universal life skill, just as aging well is. We're all going to do it. We're all going to do it. How do we do it? How do we navigate those things? And when do we notice those signposts, right?
Are you tired of feeling run down? Do you wish there was a natural, non-invasive, drug-free way to improve your overall health and well-being? If so, then let me introduce you to the Super Patch Company. Super Patches are a range of small neurotech patches that can help with a variety of issues, including sleep, immunity, pain mitigation, athletic performance, focus, anxiety, and stress. They're safe for everyone to use, and they're backed by a 30-day money-back guarantee. So what are you waiting for? Order your Super Patches today. Now available in the EU, UK, Turkey, Canada, and the US. If you're ready to take control of your health, you can find out more online at dianedinkmeyer.superpatch.com. Super Patches. There's a patch for that.
Did you grow up in an environment that was supportive of your, not just your passion, but your purpose?
My mother was a literature professor, and she was an amateur violinist. And so we all had to play an instrument. I always felt that my father is a scientist, and he played jazz piano. I have his mother's grand piano, Steinway grand piano, that's now 100 years old. My mother was an avid violinist, so she was part of the local orchestra. And then I lived in a foster home for 3.5 years, and she was a harmonica player.
Wow.
And I kind of always sort of imagined that they had received this call to be musicians, but for some reason or another, they hadn't done it. And that I was the one who was answering the call to be an artist. So, and I think, I went into composition. I mean, I was always a pianist, always played a lot of piano, but I was also a reader. I loved to read. And sometimes I would sneakily try to read my book, especially when I was younger, while I was practicing. So I'd actually have my music memorized and put my book up and play my music. And that didn't really work well. My teacher caught on really fast. But I was a good pianist by the time I went to college, and that's where Music One was always, they always felt that composers should be performers and performers should be composers. So I was required to write music, and I was a little bit horrified. But after a semester, it just seemed like that's all I wanted to do. And I think there's a quote by the philosopher Mumford that the artist endeavor is to be heard, but not to be found. To be heard, but not to be found. And I think that very much resonated to me. I had a lot of interior stuff that I hadn't worked out in my life. And music, it's so anonymous. You can write about your feelings and your anger. You can write, and nobody knows because it's music.
Right.
So it was kind of the perfect vehicle for me. And I was more than smitten. I was, I can't even say I was passionate about it. It was sort of like I had to. And I think, well, but I do think it was that I needed to understand more about my growing up and my traumas and all the stuff that had happened to me, which you can read about in my books.
Mhm.
But and I didn't have the language to do it yet. So the music really became a great vehicle. I was really pretty severely depressed at certain times. I could dissociate, like, oh man, I could really dissociate. You could say something to me that was kind of, was scary to me, and I would be gone for weeks. But it was really the birth of my daughter. I was in my, just had turned 30, and I realized that I could hand all this over to her. It could be her legacy.
Right.
Unless I really went to work. And I did and fortunately, I had a great support system. I had great friends who recommended that I work with this therapist, and did, yoga and meditation, just all the things that you need to do to create a more healthy life. And I think what's interesting about my music is that the first 10 years that I was composing, so my 20s, I don't know if that music is very good. I kind of feel like it was written out of disconnection.
Mm.
And when my daughter was born, that was the first time that I was really writing music that I thought, oh, this is good. Now, you have to get rid of you. It takes a while to find your own voice.
Right.
Yes. And it takes a while it's almost like you have to write a lot of junk to get it out of your system. So you kind of, and that doesn't mean that other artists do it that way, but that was my way. So, and the piece that I was writing when my daughter was born was called Blood Memory, A Long Quiet After the Call. And the idea that your inheritance has a lot of memories that you don't even know about that impact you. And that second decade of composing music, I was writing music about my sort of traumatic journey. And then when I got out of that second decade, the third decade, I started being free enough to be interested in what was outside of me. So how am I connected to the earth or to nature or to whatever you want to call the energy out there, God or the spirit or whatever that was. And that has been very much, for the next 20 years, that was really a preoccupation. What was that relationship? So I have a piece, for instance, that's called The Delight of Angels, because angels, according to Christian and Jewish tradition, are so joyful to be in the presence of God that they dance endlessly. They just dance the entire time. And I love that idea of being that connected, that it was just all joy. A more recent piece is called Barefoot, which is about being outside and sort of touching the earth with my feet. But it's also about the burning bush that Moses comes across, and he has to take off his shoes.
Right.
To be in the presence of God, he has to be unshod, and so that piece is also about that. And now I would say I'm writing more quiet pieces, more personal pieces. I can't really quite describe it, but I have a piece called Hush, which is it's for violin and piano, and it's about being a parent or a caretaker and comforting someone It's going to be okay. You can hush. It's fine. I'm here. I have another piece called Hum, which is, when I was growing up, gosh, men whistled all the time and women hummed. They don't do it anymore because they're plugged in, and it's like a lost art. And so I just was wanting to write about hearing somebody outside of me with this little out of tune humming, and what a joyful thing that is.
I love that.
Hey, are you like me, always looking for ways to make a positive impact in the world? Well, then join me in sponsoring Desire Childcare Organization. We are a legally incorporated, fully volunteer-based organization in Uganda, committed to providing essential needs, holistic arts-based education, and a safe family environment to 33 vulnerable children, ages 2 to 14. Your monthly sponsorship can help improve the lives of these kids toward a better future. Desire Childcare is different from any other charity I know because, well, we have zero administrative overhead. Every penny goes to the kids. And we have a plan toward self-sufficiency through agriculture, so support is temporary. It's kind of like a leg up. Visit desirechildcare.org to learn more and get involved. Let's empower and inspire the Desire kids together. Thanks.
There are a lot of parallels here. I also left home at 13 and was fostered for a time. And that was a real pivotal moment for me. And that's where I learned the word integrity. And that's sort of been my foundation stone for the rest of my life. I could have gone down a very dark road of self-destructiveness and others as well. And I didn't, because somebody literally put the word in my hand and told me to go look it up on my 14th birthday. And it was,
Perfect.
Those pivotal moments that change the course of your future, that,
Yes.
they inform us as artists, don't they? And they it's the gift that keeps on giving, in a way. They inform our parenting, they inform our grieving, they inform our cycles in our lives. And like you say, to be able to reflect back. And the title of your book, Let Your Heart Be Broken, really resonated with me, because there is a gift in the brokenness. There is, Rumi is famous for having said, your cracks are where the light gets in, right? Well,
yes.
I
my
say
gosh.
that our cracks are where the light gets out, the light that we are, right? Equally. And that's been in the ether for me this past year, especially, is really understanding that there's as much light within as there is without.
Let me read you something from the book.
I would
it's really
love
sort of
that.
the epigraph. So I was at the Open Center. I had read a lot of books by Stephen Levine. I had a heart condition for about 9 years, and reading his works were really wonderful. He worked with Kubler-Ross on death and dying, and he wrote these books. He was, did a lot of meditation, and this was really during the AIDS crisis. And, I feel like we've forgotten a lot about the AIDS crisis and how devastating that was. That our friends, especially in the arts community, were dying, and they were dying young, and just horrible, painful deaths. And there were so many loved ones who were taking care of them. And so this was a conference that had a lot of AIDS caretakers in the audience, and he was addressing them. So an audience member stands. What is the meaning of life, he asks. Stephen Levine, author, poet, best known for his works on death and dying, sits on the large stage looking down at 100 expectant faces. I am at the Open Center in New York City at a 2-day seminar. He relaxes back into his chair. I'm asked that all the time, he replies, his voice burnishing the microphone. And I really don't know. He pauses, looking to the side. He turns back smiling. But I think the meaning of life is to let your heart be broken. And then I write, the heart, the round sphere of your being, let your heart be broken. Allow, expect, look forward to the life you have so carefully protected and cared for, period. Broken, cracked, rent in two, heartbreakingly, your heart breaks, and in the two halves rocking on the table is revealed rich earth, moist, dark soil, ready for a new life to begin.
Mm.
And that's the way I start the book. That and what I loved about him was he said, let, sort of just allow it to happen. Don't stop resisting it. It's sort of, it's not even accepting, it's just sort of this sort of quiet pose of, it's going to happen, so let it happen. And everyone's heart gets broken all the time. I mean, your kids grow up and they leave the household. Your heart is broken at the loss of your, these children. You haven't lost them, but you've lost that life that you had. I mean, so in large and small ways, I think it's just a part of our life. And so that was really what my memoir is about, that idea that there's a way of walking through. This is my way of walking through. This is what I did. And once you have dealt with a big trauma, it doesn't mean that it's not going to happen again. It's not like you get a fix or you get a pass.
Yeah.
Like it's not like you paid your dues. It's just it's gonna, whatever is going to happen is going to happen, and we don't get to choose, but we can choose how we deal with it. And very much this book, at one point the book was called Grief's Grace, the idea that grieving gives you a kind of a grace. It is I don't want to say it's a gift. That seems a little
There are gifts in it. There are gifts to be.
Yes.
And in fact, I
Yes.
just, my foundation, the Lost Travelers Club, that this podcast is a funding source for and awareness raising about it. It's an empowerment organization for peregrines, for parents who have outlived their kids.
Yes.
It's not a healing circle.
Yes.
We have groups. One is dedicated, it's a fellowship of fathers that's dedicated to exploring the grieving of men, which we don't get to talk about and we're taught not to. And
no, we don't.
We're expected not to. And so we started a weekly podcast on YouTube. And it's a different constellation of men every week,
right,
talking about their grief journey. And the one that we posted last week was specifically about finding the gifts in our grief. And you and I wouldn't be having this conversation had my son not left the planet when he was meant to. So that's a huge gift. That's one of them. My theater company would not be what it is, or in existence in the same way. I wouldn't be living in Spain. We have to look back and see how one thing has led to the next. And it's very simple to do, that reflection, but it's not always easy. It's not always easy to revisit.
And my experience with grief is that it will wait for you. It's very patient. It's, you think you passed by it, or you managed to escape, or maybe in my case, I didn't know. I had grief.
Mm.
And I was quite depressed as a child. Not that I had words to talk about it, because, I think our language skills have gotten so much better with our children, and asking questions and really listening to them. In my case, I was in a foster home. I was born in Sweden, and I was placed in a foster home when I was 6 months in Sweden. And I lived in Sweden in a family for 3.5 years. And then one day, this beautiful young professor came, and she adopted me. She got to know me over a couple of months, and I left. And I always said, as a young person, as a teenager, that when I was asked, "Oh, what was it like in Sweden?" I said, "Well, it was dark. All I know is it's dark. When I look back at 3.5, it's dark, and suddenly it's light."
Yeah.
And I grew up as an adopted child. Not that my mother treated me differently or that I wasn't integrated in the family, but I always sort of knew, things are pretty shaky. If I was put in a foster home at 6 months and then I was adopted at 3.5, didn't know what was going to happen next, but you couldn't talk about it because you also had to be grateful because you'd been saved. And my mother didn't want to talk about it. So when I was 21, I happened to be back in Sweden, taking care of a 13-year-old daughter of a friend, of a family friend. And after the 2 months, I was there for about 2 months, I thought, just sort of the last week, I thought, oh, maybe I'll go find out where my real parents are. So I went down to the agency, and she had a letter, and she said, "Well, this is from your birth mother." I'm reading this. And she asked me about my life. And she said, "Your adopted mother is your birth mother. You were adopted by your birth mother."
Whoa. Whoa. Well, how often do we hear that? Ever? Never.
Yeah, not too often.
Sponsorship and listener support of the Lost Traveler podcast benefits the Lost Travelers Club, a volunteer-operated charitable foundation under United Charitable, a 501c3 public charity. Peregrine is the proper noun we now use to describe a parent who endures the loss of their beloved child, forever carrying their memory and embarking on a lifelong journey of grief, resilience, and hope. The Lost Travelers Club provides programs, resources, and empowerment opportunities for peregrines globally who are navigating their grief journey. Parents of child loss, getting there together. You can support this important work by becoming a sponsor of this podcast or visiting www.losttravelers.club for more information or to make a donation. Thanks for listening and for your continued support.
I want to say two things on behalf of my mother. It was a very smart plan. I was an illegitimate child. She was a young professor in the 50s. She would not have been able to get a job. However, it became a secret, and she didn't tell anyone. And secrets have a lot of bad mojo attached to them. They're very powerful, and they're very destructive to everyone, not just to me. But getting back to grief, what I didn't realize until I was doing therapy around the age of 30 was that I also had been grieving for 30 years for the family that I had lived in. That was my family. That was my mother and my father and my brothers. That was my city, my language, my country. And I left, and it was as if a bomb went off and destroyed them. And I think a lot of my depression came from that inability to integrate that loss. And when I started doing therapy and realized that, I must have spent the next 2 years crying.
Yeah.
Not only for that loss, but for the loss of being brought up as an adopted child when I wasn't.
Right. Right.
For having those feelings that I wanted to be part of a body or part of a history, and I wasn't. So that's why I say grief will find you.
Mhm.
It kind of chases after you. And my experience with grief was that it was like this horrible storm that just rained and crashed and just flooded everything.
Yes.
And then it sort of eased up a little bit. And then it was horrible over again. You know, everything was mildewed and just awful. 100 years of solitude.
Yes.
And then it started to ease.
That's what
And then the next time, yeah.
That's what tsunamis do. They ebb and they flow. And I talk about that a lot. That's why I call it a tsunami, because they are extremely destructive. You cannot plan for them. They come, you're doing fine. And then wham, they knock the wind out of you. And
Wham.
really trusting that you can float, trusting that it will ebb. But we're not taught that. We're not taught.
And then one day you sort of see a little bit of sunlight. You can't believe it. Oh, and then it clouds up again.
That's right.
But you saw a little sunlight. It's just this amazing thing. And now when I grieve, I usually feel it in my body. I'm feeling this thing, and then I go, is that depression? I go, well, you haven't been depressed for years. I go, oh, I bet it's grief. I wonder what ticked it off. Let's go back and review what was said. You know, was there anything that gave you that little, yeah. So I won't say I love grief, but it has given me my life back.
Yeah. Well, and there are what are called glimmers, which is the opposite of a trigger. And to notice those glimmers, of sunlight when they are there, even amidst the clouds, is so important on the grief journey. I'm working on developing an app right now called My Tsunami to help people through those triggers and bring them back to a place of glimmer, and so that they can get to the next one. You know, I think that,
and trust. Yes.
Well, you know, I had a wonderful,
I think trusting the nature of it.
When I studied at the National Theatre Conservatory for theater, I had a wonderful speech and voice teacher who, on the first day of class, was talking about the concept of surrender. And she said, surrender is not about giving up anything. Surrender is about giving in. I loved that. It really resonated with me. She said, you know, when you go whitewater rafting, the first thing that the guide will tell you before you even leave the shore is that there's a chance you're going to get knocked out of the boat into the rough water. The last thing you want to do is flail about trying to save yourself by grabbing onto the boulders and branches around you. You're going to get beaten and bruised, and maybe worse, you may drown. But if you trust that you can float and you lean back and your feet up and let that white water carry you around the boulders, right? Let the current carry you to calmer waters. Your chances of survival are far greater. Your chances of avoiding injury are far greater. And I just thought that was such a beautiful metaphor for not only life and navigating grief, but also as an artist, we fall into the white water all the time. And the beauty of allowing the current to carry you and trusting that you can float can actually bring you to very rich depths of self, and understanding that this river is long. This river is long. Getting back to the aging question, it's a beautiful thing.
Well, and that practice. We, do the best the first time. It didn't work out so well, but we'll do it again. And so I always think too that we're in it for the long run. We don't have to be a success right now. We don't have to master this. Mastery is really a lifelong occupation. It's not something that we're going to get. And of course, cultivating patience is always
Well, that's the
a
art of
lifelong practice too.
That's the art of aging, really, is cultivation of healthy ways of being. That's what aging well means to me.
Yes.
You are along the way, picking up these wonderful tools.
Shadow and Light, LLC was established by Dave Roberts and Reverend Patty Farino, co-authors of When the Psychology Professor Met the Minister. Their mission is to empower individuals to transcend life's challenges by integrating spiritual practices with psychology to achieve peace. They are available for individualized spiritual counseling, virtual or in-person book club meetings, or presentations and workshops to universities, organizations, and other interested groups. For further information, visit psychologyprofessorandminister.com.
One of the things that I've taken to doing in this is my 4th season with the Lost Traveler podcast. We have listeners in 45 countries now, which I'm over the moon about. Is I've been asking each co-host to think of a question intuitively for the next co-host without even knowing who they are. And so I have a question for you as we're wrapping up this hour. I can't believe it's already been almost an hour. And this question that was intuitively asked for you is twofold. One, what ways do you think peace is achievable in our time? And what brings you to a place of peace? Not to put you on the spot, but and then you ask a question.
So what one thing is the first question, is peace achievable, or one thing?
Well, assuming that it is, what ways do you think peace is achievable in our time?
At the end of George Eliot's Middlemarch, she talks about how life is really sustained by the actions of people. I think she says, whose graves will never be visited. So they're the anonymous people. And I think as an artist, as a composer, I always have to wonder what use is the work that I do when I should be out there feeding starving people or working towards global, reconciliation, or doing the big things. And the excuse I have made up for myself, or the reasoning that I have made up before, is that I do think that people have gifts that they're given, and not to use those gifts would kind of be a crime. And I really believe that the work I do is important. It's certainly important to me. Audience members says it's important to them. Certainly my book, I've gotten so much wonderful feedback and reviews about the book. That's not to say that if I had been unsuccessful, I would have still not have been working towards a better world. So I don't think that success is necessarily, but I guess, the Shakers have this thing that they say hands to work, hearts to God. And my interpretation is everything you do has to have the same connection as you have with God. So that I bring to everything I do that sense of my heart to God. So if I pick up trash in my neighborhood, if I'm kind to people, if I try to teach with most integrity that I can, if I teach not what I want to teach, but I teach modified to each student and their needs, if I write music that is to the best of my ability, that, my hands are to work and my hearts are to God. And I believe in, and to others, it may sound simplistic or like I'm making a big old excuse for myself, but that's what I believe, is that if you live your life with purpose and love, and really with the idea of always being peaceful, showing it in every part of what you do, even how you drive your car.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's really hard for me not to get irritated at it's taken me years when somebody's behind me and they're like trying to get past me and they're so impatient to just move over to the side.
Yeah.
Just get off the road. And that is a peaceful thing.
The word that comes
that
to mind is reverence.
Mm-hmm.
Is treating yourself and everyone around you with every action, every thought, and every word with reverence.
And sometimes I don't cut the grade.
Of course, none of us does. We all have that moment. And what brings you to a peace personally? What brings you to that place?
Oh boy, not certainly dealing with my issues has been so productive for me, just given me so much space. I would say right now, being okay with boundaries. And that sounds kind of like, what? But when I bought this property, it's about 1.5 acres, and I have 3 stepchildren and I have a daughter. And one of the things I said to them, I said, I love it when you visit me. I just love it, love it, love it. But I just want you to know that I have a magical electric fence all around my property.
Love that.
And it won't let drama in. I am happy if you talk to me about all your problems and you're doing something about it. But if you're here to complain, you're going to be caught at that fence and you'll be saying, how come I can't come in? It's not fair. I have so much to complain about. But I think reducing drama, being willing to have the strength to say, I can't fix you. I will listen to you if it makes sense, but there are times when I can't listen to you. I think as a woman, that's been very difficult because I'm supposed to be giving and loving. And certainly I spend a lot of times to my own detriment taking care of other people. But to really feel solid in my own self-worth, to be able to say, I love you. I will listen to you. I'm not going to help you with this. This is, because honestly, if you're an alcoholic, the only one who can save you is you. And it doesn't matter what I say, so I think that my electric fence has given me a lot of peace.
Yes. Well, that's part of education, isn't it? I mean,
I think so.
We're not taught at any level. We're not given that permission to set that invisible electric fence around ourselves that saves us and others from the drama that could, we could fall into that abyss. Oh. And so I think that's absolutely right. And part of this conversation of education is
Yes.
How do you practice healthy detachment and create those force fields around yourself that repel drama?
And it's such a great example for your children and people around you, so that I think that you are living a life that people would say, oh, I kind of like what she's doing in her life. I think I want some of that.
And isn't that how peace is achievable in our time? I mean, that's the answer, isn't
Right.
it? I mean, I do that in my social media. People know that they don't
Yes.
opinionate because I don't opinionate on my social media. If you want to know what I think about something,
Right.
ask me. Ask me privately.
Right.
I'm happy to share.
Mhm.
But I don't post.
Mhm.
You know, I have a rule for myself that I would not post anything on social media that I wouldn't want on the front page of the New York Times. And no opinion piece.
Right. The wonderful author, Mary Gordon, who I've worked with, I had sent her a draft of my book, and she wrote back and she had some thoughts. But the one thought that she had that I loved was, make sure you are on every page. And I thought, what does that mean? Well, don't use you. You should do this, or you should do it, or we should do this. This is what I am thinking. I will share this with you. Take it or leave it. Right. You don't like it, no problem. But that wanting other people, the shoulds and the woulds.
So what is your question for the next? I love putting people on the spot.
Oh, wow. You do. I'm going to say, what grows in your garden?
Ooh, I love that. That could be anything. That could be your inner garden. That could be your actual garden. It could be flowers. It could be container garden. It could be vegetables. It could be anything. It could be anything.
It could be your relationship with the outside world. It could be, I don't know.
Yeah. Someone is at my door. This is the life living a tiny village.
I love it.
Look at this. We're right on time. I want to thank you so very much. Let your heart be broken. I will put a link in the description below. Thank you, Tina, so much. This was a real gift.
Oh, it's been such a pleasure. Such a pleasure. Thank you.
We'll talk again soon.
Totally. I'm in for it.
You've been listening to Season 4 of the Lost Traveler podcast with Henry Cameron Allen. Visit me online at henryallen.org. Thank you to my guests, and thank you for tuning in. Let's keep striving for a better world together.